Potential Biden VP pick, Senator Tammy Duckworth, dismissing the president sending federal agents to cities like Chicago, saying the real issue is guns in the wrong hands.
If President Trump truly wants to go after violence in our country, he should call Mitch McConnell right now and ask for a sensible vote on uniform background checks. That is, let's get rid of the gun show loophole.
Let's bring in Kellyanne Conway, counselor to President Trump. Kellyanne, always great to see you. I want to start right off the bat with Senator Tammy Duckworth's comments. She says that if President Trump is truly concerned about the rise in crime, he should push for a gun control bill in the GOP-led Senate. Is she right?
And her evidence of the gun show loopholes having created this wave of violence in these democratically controlled cities, Julie, is what? I know she's auditioning for vice president for Joe Biden. She's got some stiff competition in there, so she's going to say things to mollify the hard left. But let's be honest about what's happening. You just reported very crisply that they're pointing lasers in cops' eyes, in some case permanently or temporarily damaging their eyesight. They're throwing rocks and bricks and worse. Some of them aren't even using guns. The wave of violence is leading to vandalism and gun shooting and the rest of it. But, some of these cities have the strictest gun control laws in the country. And this is what's happening. And so many of our babies are being shot to death before they can even get a start at life. So the president has said that he would be happy to send in the feds. The feds have been in some of these cities. And what has happened? Some of these mayors get in a petty, peevish Twitter spat with the president about it. Others just refuse to allow them. And what do we have in Portland? We're in the third month of nightly violence. These aren't peaceful protesters. I think peaceful protesters have every right under the First Amendment. But we long ago left that pretense. And you can't help but see what all of these cities have in common, which is strict gun control laws and Democratic mayors.
Right. Okay. So what needs to happen is something needs to get fixed. I mean, whether the feds come in or if you enact stronger gun control laws in order to keep these criminals, anybody with a prior, anybody who's been arrested shouldn't be able to buy a gun, especially if you've been arrested of a violent crime. Chicago, 33 people shot, 9 killed this weekend. Portland, you just mentioned, police there recording the highest number of death investigations in a single month in more than 3 decades. And New York City has seen more shootings so far this year in all of 2019. Mayor Bill de Blasio, you heard earlier, we mentioned on the program, blames the pandemic. And you also are talking about how this pandemic has obviously raised violence, correct? But with the police officers having zero control in a lot of these cities who are cowering to the Black Lives Matter movement, such as Mayor Bill de Blasio, how do you enforce the police, but at the same time take the guns out of hands that don't belong owning guns?
Well, we can do both. There's a lot there to unpack, Julie, but let me say very quickly that what is the evidence that people who are shooting in these cities got their firearms legally, let alone in a gun show, and through a loophole? Again, they try to cloud the whole conversation with nonsense when they know full well that the policies like Bill de Blasio's in New York, where he just took $1 billion away from the police department, and then he wonders why violence is up. He's blaming the pandemic for that, when our police officers in New York, while people were inside, sheltering in place during the lockdown, the police were out there trying to help people who were saying, I think my elderly relative has the pandemic, or can you come and check this out? They were always doing their job. But Bill de Blasio had police officers literally turn their backs on him at one of the Fallen Blues funeral years ago. He has a very complicated and very specific history with the police department that does not reflect well on him. Also, they're saying defund the police, defund the police. And they wonder why the police aren't going to be available to them. But I think they're trying to conflate gun control with the violence that's happening in the cities, most of which is not happening with firearms. Most of the violence and the vandalism is because people are going right after police officers. The federal courthouse
shootings are up
in Portland.
I mean, shootings are up in all of these cities.
Show me where those guns are being procured legally at gun shows, and then we can have the conversation. They have strict gun control laws in places like Chicago, New York, and Portland. Yes.
Okay, we're going to talk about top Democrats right now. You, as you know, are meeting with White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows and Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin. They are once again trying to negotiate another COVID relief package. Talks are stalled over unemployment benefits and a host of other topics. Listen.
We have an emergency. A building is on fire, and they're deciding how much water they want to have in the bucket. This is very important to stop. Millions of people could have fallen into poverty without the $600.
If you have unemployed people that have lost their enhanced unemployment, they need to call their Democrat senators and House members, because they're the ones that are standing in the way of having those extended right now.
Well,
this is happening as White House officials tell Fox News that President Trump is weighing unilateral action if a deal can't be reached. So let me talk to you about unilateral action. What does that mean exactly?
Well, you see that this president never hesitates, Julie, to take executive action when Congress fails to do its job, which has been often under this democratically controlled Congress. We're glad they're just here. I mean, they're often not even here, voting virtually, not showing up to work like so many Americans are and want to. But the Chief of Staff is absolutely correct. The fact is, last week, the Republicans put on the table the White House was willing to go for an additional $600 benefit for 1 week, because that was expiring July 31st. Last Friday, and lo and behold, the Democrats said no, because their eye is not on your rent or mortgage payment this month. Their eye is on August 3rd. Their eye is on November 3rd in the elections, and they want this to be a cudgel. So they would deny and deprive Americans a couple extra bucks to tide them over for their monthly bills and to feed their families, to spite the president, because they have no idea how to beat him fairly and square at the ballot box with Joe Biden, of all people. So that's what this is about. If you have a problem with it, call the Democrats. I think the other piece that's really important here is a school choice now bill that was introduced by Senators Lamar Alexander and Tim Scott, because that would allow parents to get the money from the school children and put them in a school of their choosing. That's incredibly important to dedicate 10% of the overall education funding for non-public schools. Yes.
With regard to unilateral action, obviously, yes. Can the president do it? Yes. But will it make the ultimate difference in getting both sides to negotiate and come to a conclusion? Not necessarily. So the question, and I have to go, but I just want to ask you this last question. Will the president get involved in negotiations? I know he has put pressure on both sides in the past. What's it going to take for him to get them to finally come up with a deal?
He is involved in that. He's always taken somebody's call, always happy to meet with anybody. You've seen him up on Capitol Hill many times during his presidency, and he is constantly briefed by Secretary Mnuchin, Chief of Staff Meadows, and others who are working this around the clock on Capitol Hill. But he's made very clear that he would have preferred that $600 extension. The Democrats stood in the way of that just to go on TV and lie when nobody challenges them. Oh, what was the big deal about $600? The big deal is that the Democrats stood in the way of that. But there are other ways to give Americans relief. The president is very concerned that there is an interruption for people who literally can't get back to work yet and need that money.
Okay. All right. Kellyanne Conway, good to see you. Thank you very much for your time.
Take care.